Okay, I thought I would this week talk about halfway houses. It was one of the things that was kind of requested in the comments. Actually, there's been a lot of interesting comments on the channel lately. As a matter of fact, I've had a kind of a spike in traffic, which is a good thing, I guess. I mean, I'm no bigwig YouTube personality or anything like that, but I mean, I do feel I didn't even expect to be still doing these when I first started. I didn't really have a clear-cut plan, but there's been a lot of interesting feedback, and it actually gives me new ideas on what I want to talk about next. But in order to talk about halfway houses, of course, I'm going to have to give personal anecdotes and what I observed over a whole lot of facts and figures. I know I did some searching online right before I started recording for this, and there are some states that are starting to kind of crack down on the phony schemes and the scams that go on behind these halfway houses, but I'm not really sure what all the legalities are. I know some of them are involved in insurance scams, and I know some of them are involved in, there's been situations where the halfway house owners were, dealing drugs to the people who were living there. That doesn't surprise me in the least, believe it or not. And in my own personal dealings, I dealt with 3 of them, and I never lived in any of those places. And it would be impossible for me to actually talk about how I got exposed to what goes on behind the scenes with these places without going into a little bit of background about drug corps. I had been bouncing in and around AA for quite a while when I ended up in drug corps, and I'm not proud of the reason why I ended up in drug corps. It was involved with, drinking and driving more than once. And at the time I think I'd been in jail about like 60 or 70 days. When the lawyer I had hired, I didn't know any lawyers, and it was an AA person, which was a bad mistake, and you'll find out why I say that later. Came to me and said something about, there's a possibility we can put you in drug corps. And I didn't know anything about drug corps, outside of what I had seen people in AA meetings say, I'm in drug corps. I didn't really understand the ins and outs of it. But when I first got exposed, I remembered the drug court judge and the drug court counselors. They all had this kind of smug attitude towards me. They were saying, you just signed the papers to get in here so you could get out of jail. You don't realize, just what you've got yourself into, and which I found a little bit unprofessional for so-called trained counselors and so-called judges, to address somebody like that. But that's not the truth of the situation. That was not the main reason why I was convinced to sign up for it. The main reason was because the lawyer told me that if I, entered into the program and I didn't get any sanctions and I didn't violate anything, and I didn't, at the time I thought it was just a simple case of, okay, I'll pass my drug test because I'm not going to drink, which is kind of further proof that I'm not powerless over alcohol, because the whole time I was at drug corps, I never took a drink one time. I meant that they weren't going to get me on that one. But I found out there's a whole lot more to it than that. I mean, if you think that, when you sign those papers, they don't really tell you all that it's going to entail. I just thought to myself, as long as I'm clean, I ain't got nothing to worry about. Well, that's as far from the truth as you can imagine. But I did it because they said they would wipe my background clean, is what they told me at the time. That if I got in there and did the thing, that my record would be, you would all be expunged, and I wouldn't have anything, lurking in my background. And because I had never really been in trouble with the law before in my entire life. I mean, I had been in treatment, and I had an incident that landed me in the mental hospital about a year prior due to drinking and stuff. But I had never been in legal trouble in my entire life, and I didn't realize that when you're tied up into the legal system, the inmates, of course, are running all kinds of scams on you, but so are the lawyers, and so are the judges, and pretty much everyone. And there's really no way to prepare for that. You don't want to openly appear naive in a situation like that. You want to kind of act like you got some kind of street credit or something like that, or you're smart. But really and truly, if you're not prepared to be in that place, and I certainly wasn't, and you're not really in your right mind, and I most certainly wasn't, because I'd been on a really bad drunken binge at the time, and I wasn't in, a very rational, sane place. You can't help but fall for it. So I, got in there thinking I was gonna, have my record cleaned, and I was saying, this is gonna be tough, this is gonna be hard, but it'll be worth it in the end. And about 7 months in, I remember I got this letter from the state, and the state said that they were going to pursue a case against me to permanently revoke my license for at least a period of 3 years, I think it was at the time. It actually took me 8 years almost to get my license back, and I got saddled with so many fines and so many other things. And at the time, I remember calling my lawyer, and I said to my lawyer, well, I'm almost through with drug court now. I've only got 7 or 8 months left, and once you guys expunge my record, and that's when I was informed that my record would never be expunged. That the state that I live in, they can never take a DUI off your record. That you'll always have one, there's no way to expunge it. So in other words, I got rooked. I was kind of shocked at the time. I didn't really even know how to react or handle that. And I just said, well, what was the purpose of me entering into drug court if there was never going to be nothing done about my background? That's the sole reason why I entered. I mean, I only had another 30 to 45 days left in jail at the time. And she said, I thought it would be a good idea for you to focus on your recovery for a change, and I was a little bit taken aback by that. I was like, wait a minute, you're a lawyer. Okay, you're hired. You took practically most of my savings to represent me. And then I end up in this thing, and then you're going to throw some recovery jargon at you. That's why I was saying, don't ever hire somebody in AA to be your fucking lawyer, But anyway, part of what it involved being in, you have these 3-hour classes a week in the first stages of it. That goes on for like 2 or 3 months. And it's kind of a case of confrontation therapy, where they put you, you're in a little circle, and the counselor will call somebody out. Like, let's just say they call you out, and they put you in the middle of the circle, sitting in a chair, and they'll say something like, this person thinks they're tougher than all the rest of us, so today we're going to make the person cry, or we're going to try to tempt the person with their drug of choice, and we're going to break them down psychologically, like that. When I first entered in at the time, I said to myself, I'll just be quiet and I won't participate in any of this psychotic nonsense, and I'll just do my time and get through this. And it turns out I was in my second day in when they called on this one guy in the circle, and they wanted him to join in on browbeating this girl that had lost her custody of her kids because of methamphetamines. And he wouldn't do it. He just said, well, I'm not really down with this kind of stuff. And the counselor looked at him and said, oh, you're not. You're just going to be quiet through the whole entire program. Well, I know what we can do with you. We're going to give you 2 more weeks in jail to think about it. And then when you're ready, you can come back to group. And they can actually do that in those kind of confrontation therapies if you're in drug court. If you don't participate, if you don't play along with their weird Stanford prison experiment type environment, they can throw you in jail for however long they want. I knew one guy that because he didn't have a sponsor and he hadn't worked the 4-step at his regular AA meetings, they put him in jail for a month. And they extended his time. You see, that's another thing they don't tell you before you get in there. You can be sentenced to 12 months. Well, now it's, I think, automatically 18 months. It was when I left anyway. But if they don't think you're actually taking it seriously enough, they can give you 24 months, just out of the drop of a hat like that. You don't have to drink. You don't have to fail a drug test. You can simply not participate in the group or simply be kind of quiet. Or even worse, you can, I remember one guy was sitting in there and they said, where do you live right now? And he said, well, since I lost my job, I'm living with my mother. And they said, well, you're not a real man if you're living with your mother. We're going to court order you into a halfway house. And that's where they put him. And it was really funny. Not funny, ha-ha, but funny, strange. that the particular halfway house owner that they would court order everybody to, it was this one particular halfway house guy. It was almost like he had some kind of crooked deal going on with the judge, because anytime someone in drug court needed to be, put into a halfway house according to their write-ups or whatever it was, I used to wonder what kind of professional licenses these people had. If you were a guy, you went to his halfway house, and if you were a woman, you went to his wife's halfway house. Yeah, they were a couple. They owned all these halfway houses. And I remember one day I was sitting in group, and I wasn't participating, and the counselor just said, well, I think that you sit in this group and think you're better than all the rest of us because you don't have any felonies or any drug convictions or anything really too tough. I mean, you're just a drunk with DUIs. And I said, well, I certainly don't think I'm better than everybody in here. I've never, postulated that. And he said, well, from now on, you're going to give everybody rides to the drug test. You're going to go to the halfway houses and you're going to pick people up and you're going to give them rides to the drug test. And you're also going to go to the AA meetings that happen in these halfway houses. You're going to go to all of them. And, at the time, I was like, well, I mean, I can only fit so many people into my little car. And he's like, well, if you're not cooperating, maybe I could give you 2 weeks in jail to think about it. So, of course, I went along with it. But this guy and his wife who owned all these halfway houses, this was the first halfway house group I had exposure to. They had these house managers. When I used to have to attend their AA meetings, when I had to pick people up for their drug test. And these people running these places, they knew that all the guys that were in there by court order. They knew that all the people in there were pretty much at their mercy and had no real choice, in anything. So the first thing I found out about this particular guy, your rent was kind of based on how much money you made if you had a job. But it really more or less boiled down to 80% of your rent or 90% of your rent. When I would have to attend his AA meetings that he held at his halfway house, the first thing he would do is he would take people's checks and he'd say, well, I'll give you enough for cigarettes, but you don't need the rest of it because you'll probably go drink it up or drug it up, and the rest of it you can pay the courts and the rest of it can go to me. And I thought, is that really... I've heard of such a thing as a sliding scale before, but I've never seen anything quite like that, where you're just pretty much... And you see, you're in a position when this guy's taking all your money, you can't tell him to go fuck himself. You can't say, well, I'm going to go find me another halfway house that'll take me. If you do that, he goes to the drug court judge, and he says you're being uncooperative, and you get about a month in jail, if you're lucky. I knew one guy that was in an intolerable situation in that same halfway house, and... he's like, the only job I can get is at McDonald's, and, he's leaving me $20 a week to smoke cigarettes with, and he's taking everything else, and I can't even pay the drug court judges. So he actually talked to somebody who owned a different halfway house, and he went down there to the judge, and he asked him, look, is there any way I can go to a different halfway house? I mean, this just isn't working out. And I guess the judge and him and this halfway house owner had some kind of crooked deal going on, because the judge threw a temper tantrum and had the guy put in jail for like 2 months. And then when he come back out, not only did he put him back in the halfway house, but he told him he owed him all this back rent for the whole entire thing. Now, that's one halfway house that I dealt with during my drug court time. And the places were slum tenements. I used to pick these people up and take them to meetings and drug tests. I didn't really mind picking these people up because, in spite of what a lot of people have been led to believe, a majority of people in drug court, actually, I'll say this, on a general basis, you have almost like two types. You have the really true hardcore dangerous criminals, and then you have a lot of people that are just, like me, they got caught drinking and driving, or they got caught with, there was one kid in there, he was 17 fucking years old, and he got caught with some marijuana, and all of a sudden, due to both his parents and due to the legal system or whatever, they told him he could do a week in jail or he could do a year of this. I remember saying, you signed up for a year of this over a week in jail. Give me a week in jail if you're going to let me go and not put me through this garbage any longer. But the places, I wouldn't have let... I felt dirty walking around those places when I'd go to pick these people up. It was just a total slum tenement. I mean, the wiring wasn't even safe. One of them caught on fire one time, and of course that incident was hushed up really quickly. Now we got the halfway house owner. He spent all of his time in AA meetings. And he was one of those people that was always like a guest speaker. He was almost like a celebrity speaker. He was always talking about what an evil, horrifying, dangerous criminal he was when he was on the streets. And he would sit in those, we had to attend some of his speaker meetings as a condition of being in drug court. If you didn't, you could take a couple of weeks in jail for that. But he would sit in there and he would talk about how, he looked upon his houses as a place to transition people into the future, and he tried not to even charge people any money, who lived there, that sometimes he had to do without in order to help the people, because it's all about service today. And I'm just, you can't even say anything because you could sit in jail for, up to 2 or 3 months for this, or you could actually incur worse. But while these people are living in these deplorable conditions, I mean, I knew of people that caught staph infections. I knew people that caught lice. I knew people that had bed bugs. Like I said, I knew one of the places caught on fire. This fucking guy, he's driving around 2 sports cars, and he's got like 1 or 2 motorcycles, and he's got a fucking boat, and he spent all of his time, hanging out with his old-timer buddies, uploading pics of himself to YouTube and all of that. I mean, it was just so fucking disgusting, I mean, I really had a very cynical view of the legal system before I got into all this trouble. But I mean, at the time, it was just like, I remember there was just like this throbbing pain in my head about how can something so fucking crooked, how can it go on, like that? I mean, it was just almost like unbearable rage. And you got to remember, you can't say anything when you're in there unless you want to sit back in jail. Now, this is only, I've only outlined a tiny portion of what the drug court program entails. You wouldn't believe. In fact, I should do a whole video on it. In fact, I will. That'll be my next one. But that was one halfway house owner, and he's hailed as some great figure in this city, and in fact, he's got his picture on the front page with the drug court judge a couple of times, and he talks about how he's turning people's lives around. Yeah, you're stealing 80% of their paychecks, 90% of their paychecks, and you're making them live in horrifying conditions, and you get your fucking picture in the paper. It's just, I think one thing that drug court did, I've never had much love of authority in my life. I've never had any love of any real authority or any kind of government or any kind of political party or any kind of right-wing, left-wing. I've never really been truly able to identify with any of it, but I think that it made me so anti-authoritarian that I'm almost like I don't even know if he really said it or not, but it's like W.C. Fields has supposedly said I would never join a club that would have me as a member. I mean, AA left such a sour, vile taste in my mouth and the legal system itself that I can't have faith in any group of people anymore, That was one halfway house. There was another group of people I had to pick up from another halfway house owner. And this guy was the same way. It was a slum tenement. I mean, it was a horrible slum tenement. I mean, I had to bring a guy there that was brand new to drug court. It was his first night there, and the halfway house owner wouldn't even show up at the place. He keeps it unlisted in the phone book. He doesn't have a Facebook page or anything like that because he doesn't want people to see just how horrible this was. I mean, I had to go into this really nightmare part of town, the kind you see in these freaking movies, and it was like only like 8 or 9 o'clock at night in the wintertime. But I mean, you're almost like, if we stand out on the street too much longer, somebody's going to rob us or kill us or do something to us, And the building, I mean, it looked like an abandoned building. I mean, there's graffiti all over it. There's junk piled up in the side of the yard, and there's, it's something out of a nightmare, completely. And this house manager was standing there, and he's like, let me show you where you're going to live, And we take him to this room, and there's like a fucking hole in the window with some cardboard taped over it with duct tape. It's like 20 degrees in the room. And there's like one bed, one mattress laying in the floor with some blankets that are so filthy that, I mean, I don't even think putting them through a washing machine would clean them. And, the guy was kind of looking confused. He was like, wait a minute, you want me to move into this? And house manager's like, well, if you don't like it, we can go to the judge and we can tell you that we can see about you spending some time in jail. Maybe that would do, some better. Maybe you'd appreciate this more. I mean, this is another bigwig in AA, by the way, another one that goes to AA meetings. It was really funny because this guy, this halfway house owner, he used to talk all the time about being in Vietnam, and he would talk about how he was like an infantry guy in Vietnam. He one time even said that he one time said he was with a special forces unit that used throwing stars to kill the fucking enemy. I mean, I'm not joking, and nobody in the AA meeting seemed to get this. They were all just like, when he was talking. And then I heard him at his speaker meeting one night, and he said, I was born in 1967. I was like, wait a minute. You were born in 1967, but you were with a special infantry unit in Viet fucking Nam? I mean, oh my God. It's almost like I don't really truly know whether to have hysterics crying or whether I want to laugh just thinking about these horrible places. But there was, and he was another one. He actually owned a used car lot. I mean, can it get any crazier than this? But he actually did, and he actually used to brag about, because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous today, I have plenty of money in the bank. And I was thinking, yeah, but them people that's living in your fucking slum tenement sure in the hell ain't seeing any of that. But the last halfway house owner on the list that I had experience with, he liked to throw people out in the middle of the night when it was raining. That was his main thing. He had his own in-house system of drug tests. He wasn't tied up with the courts or anything like that, but there were people that I just knew that were there, and I attended a couple of his in-house meetings. Now, another thing he did, he wasn't too worried about, about sobriety so much, because half the people that was in that place, they still drank, they still smoked pot, some of them even still smoked crack. But a lot of people had prescription medications, and when he would throw those people out into the street in the middle of the night when it was raining, he would make sure to keep all their prescription medications. And he was another bigwig in AA. He was another one that was at every noon meeting and 5:30 meeting and 8 o'clock at night meeting, and always talking about practicing the principles. And his favorite thing was to say, and today I stand flat-footed and I tell the truth when I really want to lie. I wanted to say, well, you confiscate everybody's medication, and you got a whole closet back there in the back of your house that's just, it's full of Percocets, oxycodones, it's full of every kind of pain pill, every kind of thing you can imagine that you've confiscated off of all these people that you tossed out in the street after you took all their money. And you're actually going to come here and you're going to talk about, living in God's will and practicing spiritual principles. But that was my experience with all three halfway house owners. And so none of the three were worth a shit. There was a lady when I first got involved in anti-AA kind of, I don't know if you'd call it activism or what you would call it, but she was someone who lost a son to like a drug overdose in one of those kind of places. I know she had kind of a serious outcry about the kind of violations that go on about it, but I haven't kept in touch with her. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know she had link after link after link of one human rights abuse after one human rights abuse after one human rights abuse with these places. It's almost like there's no actual law, there's no actual regulation, there's no actual anything when it comes to opening a halfway house. Like right now, I'm renting this place from a guy that, I've joked before, he's using it as a storage place. And it's funny because I've offered to kind of straighten this all out and organize it for him, and every time I do, he's like, no, I'll be back next week. I'm going to make sure. But I'm not going to badmouth him. He's a good guy. I mean, he's certainly not no fucking cult member. Anybody could open one. I could open a halfway house right here if I wanted to. I mean, it shocks me that, we live in a world where it seems like government intrusion is everywhere anyway. Yet these halfway houses kind of just skate underneath the radar. I knew that one guy that was partners with the drug court judge. He used to brag openly about how, this is all run by private donations. This has nothing to do with tax dollars. I don't believe that for a fucking instant. How did you partner up and make a deal with the drug court judge to halfway, to have everybody court ordered into one of your slum tenements or one of your wife's slum tenements if you're not getting something back there? It's a shame that that there's no way I can blow the lid on these people. I don't know exactly what avenue I would have to blow the lid on these people. I mean, you certainly couldn't do it with the local press here, because the guy who's the drug court judge and this guy, you know, they're on the news on a regular basis. You know, oh, we're saving lives, we're giving back to the community. Now, here's the thing that it seems like nobody is smart enough to figure out here is that in order to be in drug court, you have to pay out of pocket. It, too, is a sliding scale thing. Okay, because I was paying $350 a month to be in drug court. My DUI fines hadn't even started yet. There was another guy that was paying $650, and there was another guy that was paying $150, and he was practically living on the streets. Now, at the end of your time in drug court, if you can't pay off your fine, you stay in drug court. I knew someone that was going to graduate and didn't get to graduate until 7 months later because they couldn't come up with all the drug court fees. But the thing I was saying is the public doesn't seem to realize this, because drug court openly solicits donations from the public all the time. I mean, they'll have a little marathon, you know, and they'll advertise it on the fucking news, and everybody will go down there and they'll put money, you know, almost into this thing. And this thing is also funded out of the pockets of the taxpayers. So, I mean, they're doing really quite well for themselves monetarily. And it seems like they've got the public duped on something like that. I mean, who would I go to if I wanted to blow a lid on this? Would I go to the local news media? They're on their side. You know, who would you go to? The state government? Good luck getting them to call you back. It's just, if I get to dwelling on the topic long enough, I get very, very upset. I mean, to think about this level of injustice, and it goes on all the time. It's been going on, you know, for no telling how long. You know, and it's going on everywhere. You know, it's good to see some states are cracking down on it, but they're not waking up fast enough, in my opinion. You know, so yeah, if you know anything about it, I don't know if we should, how you would put the word out. Any tips or suggestions would probably be welcome. Anyway, that's my Easter Sunday broadcast. So I'll hopefully see you guys in just a few days. I want to do one on drug court. I want to do a couple of others. I got a zillion topics that go through my head, and then I get the camera rolling and the microphone in front of me, and I draw a blank. So anyway, next time.